Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to, of course, the Sports Lovers. New toys, of course, is what we're trying out here. We got a new webcam, so hopefully the quality is a little bit better here on the YouTube channel. However, with that being said, the NFL draft was this last weekend, not this past weekend, but the last weekend. We're going to break down the Carolina Panthers 2026 NFL draft class. We're going to talk about the guys that I think can make some big impacts for this offense / defense. We are also going to break down every single player in this Carolina Panthers draft class. But first, if you are new to the channel, you already know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe, turn that bell on, as we do our best to post on this channel every single day as we are on the road to college and NFL football season. Hit the sub button, leave a comment so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Like I said, we are on the road to the college football season. We will have our Dallas Cowboys NFL draft class tomorrow, and then Wednesday, of course, we will recap the whole draft and talk about which teams had the best draft for sure. So stay tuned, hit the sub button. We're on the road to college football season. There's a lot of football content coming this week. And without further ado, let's hop into this Carolina Panthers draft class. Of course, let us recap this Carolina Panthers 2026 NFL draft class. I got it up here on the monitor for me, so excuse me while I'm looking over at that. With round 1, pick number 19, the Panthers took offensive tackle Monroe Freeling out of Georgia. A really solid pick. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. However, in round 2, pick number 49, we took Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech, a local product down here in South Alabama. Round 3, pick number 88, I believe what is probably the biggest steal of the Carolina Panthers draft class, and that is Chris Braswell III out of Tennessee. This dude is an absolute baller. We'll talk about him in a second as well. Then, round 4, pick 129 out of Texas A&M. We went with the cornerback Will Lee III. Then, round 5, pick number 144 was Sam Hecht, the center out of Kansas State. Round 5, of course, pick 151, traded a little bit. We originally had 7 picks. Now we had 2 in the 5th round. We had 1 in the 6th. But we did trade that pick. Now we have had 1 in the 5th. We traded up to get Zach Lee Weedy out of Penn State, I believe is how you say his name. And then round 7, pick 277, linebacker Jackson Kuwach out of Miami, Ohio. So those are the Carolina Panthers 2026 NFL draft class. Let us go ahead and break it all down. All right, so starting off, of course, round 1, pick number 19 out of Georgia was the offensive tackle Monroe Freeling. Perhaps probably the best offensive line in this NFL draft. Dan Morgan himself got, of course, a steal in offensive tackle Monroe Freeling as one of the best run blockers in all of college football, allowing 2 sacks in 2025. Absolutely insane stuff coming from the first-round pick out of Georgia. The Georgia offensive line also finished with a 1.8 pressure allowed rate, which was the best in all of college football. So those 2 things right there just add up in and of itself to where I think Monroe Freeling was a steal at pick number 19. Also, Freeling's size is the main reason that the Carolina Panthers drafted him, as at 6'7", 315 pounds, he can attack the defense quickly. And, of course, we've seen it in the Sugar Bowl where he kind of just trampled a dude against Ole Miss. That's probably his most famous clip, I guess, on X, Instagram, and social medias and stuff. So that is probably his most famous thing, but he does love to tackle people, and ultimately that is the reason why. Again, Dan Morgan here was not just thinking about Bryce Young in this draft. He was thinking about who could step in for Akanu, who is down, of course, right now after going out in that playoff game against the Rams. It's going to take some time to get him back. Also signing a couple of Packers offensive line as well, just to kind of mesh and see which is the right fit for Bryce Young as well. Then, when it comes to the running backs, Jonathan Brooks, Chuba Hubbard, we've seen what those guys can do when they have open lanes available. So, again, Dan Morgan wasn't just thinking about Bryce Young and his protection. He was thinking about opening up the run game without Rico Dowdle. How are you going to kind of transition now to where you have Etienne, Brooks, Chuba, all in the backfield, and ultimately this is how you do it with a big run protector, or with a big run blocker who can also open up holes in the offensive line. So again, a outstanding pick for the Carolina Panthers here in round 1, pick number 19, as the Panthers may have gotten the steal of the NFL draft. All right, moving on to round 2, pick number 49, defensive lineman Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech. The second round selection for, of course, the Carolina Panthers defensive lineman Lee Hunter out of Mobile, Alabama. So kind of a little bit of a local boy. Went to Blount High School. Also came down here in the Senior Bowl and also went up against Sam Hecht, who we will talk about later on in this video. So those two guys were going at it all week down here during Senior Bowl week in Mobile, Alabama. I was there. Personally got to see both of that happen. Lee Hunter was, of course, Carolina's trading up for. Dan Morgan was very high on him from the get-go. He low-key, again, I think got a payday because he went to the Senior Bowl and put the work in. So, again, just shout out to the to the Panini Senior Bowl now, as that is the now new title sponsor of course, the Senior Bowl this past year, changing it up. However, Hunter, since 2023, was first in tackles when it came 146, first in TFLs, 38, first in run stops, 181, and second in QB pressures with 75. So this is a dude who loves to get to the quarterback, and we have seen that a lot. We saw it in Texas Tech's game, in the BYU game, which was the most important game of the season where Lee Hunter went absolutely off. So again, Lee Hunter is a dude who I like to, of course, kind of add some depth to that defensive line. I don't think he's going to be a day one starter or anything like that, especially with Derek Brown, Jalen Phillips coming in now off the linebacker position. So, again, there are going to be some dudes that he's going to have to outcompete for, but I do like the addition to the defensive line room. And Lee is great at stopping the run. If he's late on certain situations, that's going to show. But again, if he can get onto it early, then he'll be very effective for a defensive line room with, like I said, that already includes Derek Brown. Also including Shy Tuttle, I believe. He is now gone. So they are going to have to replace some guys on this defensive line. And I do think that Lee Hunter was part of that decision-making in the draft room. And Dan Morgan gets an absolute steal out of the NFL draft. Round 3, pick number 88. That is Chris Boswell, the second wide receiver out of Tennessee. Carolina's third round pick is a guy who I think was a steal at number 88. I think this is the steal of the NFL draft, if you're asking my opinion. Mel Kiper was talking about it. This dude was first in the SEC when it comes to yards after catch. Also is 6'4", size frame. Jalen Coker is going to be able to move now to the slot full time, with Boswell being a great third addition with his body and size. So another weapon to add to the wide receiver room that's tall and lengthy, just like Teteroa McMillan is, of course, to Bryce Young. So Bryce Young gets another dude who I think is going to be an absolute stud in this game. Coker, he thrived in the second half when it came to the slot, so maybe they're going to move him, like I said, to it full time. And ultimately, I think it's the best decision when you're trying to better this football team. So I think that's probably the best decision that Dan Morgan and Dave Canales made to draft this guy. Boswell's best game, again, came against Georgia in 2025, where he had 177 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Dogs, and again, can be a more T-Mac guy for the Carolina Panthers. Another Teteroa McMillan type of guy when it comes to his size and ability to get yards after the catch. If Bryce utilizes him well, then he is going to be, again, just another threat to have for this Carolina Panthers offense. And ultimately, I do think he is going to end up taking Xavier Legette's wide receiver 3 spot. I really do. I just think that is how good this Chris Boswell guy is. And ultimately, with Xavier Legette's last season that he had, sure, he's been putting in the work this offseason, and we're going to have to see it in OTAs. We're going to have to see it in training camp and stuff like that. But I do believe if Chris Boswell has a great training camp and, of course, gets his foot going off the ground early, then I do think he is going to overtake Xavier Legette and can be another tall, lengthy wide receiver in addition to Teteroa McMillan. So this is a steal for the Carolina Panthers, if you're asking me, and ultimately I am here for it as Chris Boswell II has been drafted at pick number 88. Moving on to round 4, pick 129, cornerback Will Lee II out of Texas A&M. The Carolina Panthers, I will say, before we start talking about Will Lee, they have a type, and that is tall, lengthy, athletic dudes. That's what Dan Morgan is trying to build for Bryce Young with the wide receiver core. That's what he's trying to build on defense with Jalen Phillips, with now Willie II. Of course, J.C. Horn is going to be talked about in there as well. That is the Carolina Panthers strategy, is to have tall dudes that are also freakishly athletic and one of the best at their position. So Will Lee is an absolute dog at cornerback and a very undervalued guy at 129. I thought Carolina had a great value pick right there with considering what they did, because they traded up in the 5th round to draft an offensive tackle. They would go ahead and go defense in the 4th round, and ultimately I think that is probably the best case scenario. And I'm curious to see how Carolina is going to utilize him with his 6'1" frame. And again, he's very tall, lengthy, like I was saying, but he also just adds a lot of value to a very good quarterback room who can come in if needed and just make some plays, right? Again, like I was saying, Dan Morgan likes the type. He's like tall guys, even on the defense, as that they have the full ability to go up and attack the football. Pretty much Dan Morgan's thought process is see ball, get ball. I believe that is why he drafted a few of these dogs like Chris Boswell, who we just talked about, like Willie II, who we're talking about now, who, of course, in the Texas game last year, pushed a dude so hard in bounds, he eventually started a fight, just showing how competitive he really is. Again, I think even more adds on to the fact that Dan Morgan likes dogs and he likes tall, athletic players at his positions. And Carolina ultimately got a steal at pick number 129. And I can't wait to see how the defense is going to improve in 2026. Already a really good defense, if you're asking me, when Derek Brown's fully healthy, when Jalen Phillips is also fully healthy as well, when guys like J.C. Horn are getting in there, Mike Jackson as well. So they're going to be good mentors to Willie II. I do believe that. And the defense, I'm just very excited to see how it's going to improve with these additions in the NFL draft. So, again, Carolina getting another steal at 129, and will lead the second out of Texas A&M. All right, moving on to, of course, round 5, pick 144, center Sam Hecht out of Kansas State. Getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Sam Hecht made his value skyrocket at the Senior Bowl with his one-on-one drills. A lot of the stuff happened in his one-on-one drills where he went up against guys like Lee Hunter, also went up against really good defensive linemen out of Oregon, Texas. Malik Muhammad was also down here at the Senior Bowl. He went up against some really good, fast dudes and ultimately held his own in the one-on-one drills. I personally saw a little bit of it where he went up against Kieron Crawford, guys like that who are already drafted in the 2nd round, like Lee Hunter as well. Again, showing some promise in a Big 12, where the Big 12 had somewhat of a down year if you're comparing it to Texas Tech and guys like, and the only Texas Tech is the only school, of course, that I think was in the Big 12 this year that was actually really good. So again, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that he's going to start or anything like that, but he did only allow 7 hurries in 2025 with a PFF grade of 80.3. And I will say this, like I said in the last clip that we just talked about with Will Lee II, Dan Morgan has a type, and it's tall and a guy who is good at stopping the run. Also, a guy that is good when it comes to opening up holes for the running backs. You are trying to find dogs at the offensive lineman position for your quarterback and your future franchise quarterback. So, again, Bryce Young just picked up his 5th-year option yesterday, so at the time of recording this video. So I fully believe that they are going all out in this draft and wanted to draft as many offensive line as they can with great value. And Sam Hecht and another deep offensive lineman, the guys that they already have, and Monroe Freeling, are going to be those dogs for the Carolina Panthers. So again, they got a steal at pick 144, and ultimately it is all about protecting Bryce Young and opening up the run game for the offensive line, and Sam Hecht can do just that for the Carolina Panthers. All right, moving on to round 5, pick 151, safety Zaki Wheatley out of Penn State. Now, personally, I'm going to be so for real before we talk into this video and get into the breakdown. I have never heard of this dude in my entire life. With that being said, Round 5, also another steal for Dan Morgan and the Carolina Panthers. Out of Penn State, Dan Morgan wanted defense and offensive line in this draft, and clearly that is where he went and got the best guys available at their positions, and it showed this weekend. Wheatley allowing a 69.2 passer rating when targeted in 2025, also allowing only 7 receptions and coverage in 2025. I will say this, just like I talked about with Texas Tech in the Big 12, take this with a grain of salt as this was against Big Ten opponents. However, with that being said, for him to go out there and ball out what they did when Penn State fired their head coach James Franklin is only a testament to how good Zakee Wheatley, really is. So again, he also has 59 solo tackles, again showing how good he is in the open field and can adapt to any type of ball movement at any given time. So these guys, they absolutely ball out, and in the Big Ten, whether it's the Big Ten, whether it's the AAC, whether it's the MAC, which we'll talk about here in a second, guys like that, I think Dan Morgan is looking for more and more, just looking for ballers and looking for people who care to play the position regardless of the situation that they are in. And we see this with Zakee Wheatley, where James Franklin, like I said, just got fired during the mid-season and continued to go out there and ball out in 2025. Again, keep in mind, it's the Big Ten. Take it with a grain of salt. We'll see how that translates to the NFL. But I do think that this is a great addition to the safety room. Now, he's not going to start or anything like that over J.C. Horn or Mike Jackson, but I do think he's going to come in, make an impact, and definitely up the competition for the Carolina Panthers. So I like this pick at 151. It can only help, not hurt. And if it does hurt, then you just cut them just like they normally do. The NFL's a business, guys, so I'm going to go with that. But the Carolina Panthers, round 5, 144, pick Zakee Wheatley out of Penn State. And last but certainly not least, of course, how can I forget the round 7 selection, pick number 227, Jackson Kuwach out of Miami of Ohio, the linebacker out of Miami of Ohio. I will say this, probably going to utilize him more on special teams, if anything, and we'll talk about towards the end of the video. However, with that being said, the most valued player Carolina could have gotten at this position by far, right? Kuwach was outstanding for Miami of Ohio in 2025. Only spent 1 year with the Red Hawks as a transfer, just kind of working his way up the ranks, I guess you would say. But he had 109 tackles and 10 TFLs for the Red Hawks in a really good, really deep, I think, MAC conference. So that's for sure. This dude can definitely ball out. Balled out in the Hula Bowl again for Miami, even though he got a shrine invite as well. So this dude is definitely a proven and definitely can ball out and can help out on the special teams if needed. I don't expect him to help him out too much on defense. I really don't. But when it comes to special teams, the Carolina Panthers, that is probably their biggest problem. I know we just had a punt block in the wild card game against the Rams, but other than that, this special teams unit is not the greatest other than the kicker, so it definitely could use some work. And I do think he's going to be utilized more on special teams than anything. So with round 7 to close out the draft, the Carolina Panthers select Jackson Kuwach, and he is probably the most valued guy they could have gotten at that position. All right, so to wrap this video up, kind of the first video with my new toys, so bear with me when it comes to editing and stuff like that. However, with the Carolina Panthers draft summary recap, I think the Carolina Panthers got a steal at every position. I really do. I think Dan Morgan took his time when it came to this draft, and Dan Morgan has a type and clearly got what he wants out of this draft. Again, not the flashiest of means for sure, but to get an A+ out of this on PFF is one of the only 2 teams to do so with the Browns and the Panthers. It has to say something about Dan Morgan and this, of course, front office when it speaks to the players they are drafting. Dan Morgan, ultimately, is cooked, and the future is bright in Carolina after they are coming off an NFC South championship. So let me know, of course, what you guys think about this in the comments down below. Where do you stand on the Carolina Panthers draft class in the comments as well? Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn that bell on as we do our best to post on this channel every single day. I'm going to hop off, get this edited so you guys can watch it on time. The Atlanta Hawks season did come to an end on Monday, so no more playoff basketball in the ATL. But hey, that's all right. We still got some playoff action. Second round tonight as well. So lots of stuff happening in the world of sports. The Braves are the hottest team in baseball. Just some minor stuff that's happening as we get ready for the World Cup here within the next couple of months too. We'll have a World Cup preview very, very soon. Also, this week we will talk a little bit about the Dallas Cowboys 2026 draft. We'll also recap the draft as a whole. And then Friday and Thursday, we will play our Road to Glory and, of course, our Vanderbilt Dynasty. So stay tuned for that. Hit the sub button. Leave a comment down below so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Let me know what you thought of the video in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace.